When I think about Black history, which is really American history, there's so much that we can learn from the past.
We support all entrepreneurs and that there is a space for every type of entrepreneur in our ecosystem.
It's a celebration to raise the awareness of the contributions of African Americans.
Honoring the past, present, and future. Visit greenvillesc.gov/Black History for more.
To celebrate Black history and accomplishment, the Post and Courier once again presents this series of video interviews featuring 12 dynamic leaders to know in South Carolina. We talk with people from all over the state about their efforts to advance social justice, celebrate Black culture and enterprise, address community needs, and create a better world. Our videos will be released monthly on the Post and Courier website through January 2024. To watch and to read our 12 profiles, plus essays on Martin Luther King Jr., go to postandcourier.com/Black History. Join us again this year in learning about some of our state's remarkable change agents. Tamara King.
Yes.
Good day.
Good day.
Good midday on a rainy day in Columbia.
Yes.
Here we are at the main Richland Library.
In Columbia, South Carolina.
In the middle of Columbia, South Carolina, where apparently you're doing all kinds of things.
Yes.
And one big thing in particular, which I really want to dig into immediately. First, tell us your title.
My title is the Richland County Chief Equity and Engagement Officer.
Okay, and you are spearheading a very impressive, interesting project.
It is a team effort. I want to start by saying that, but yes,
of course,
it is something that I am. It's under my umbrella as the Chief Equity and Engagement Officer.
Well, it was also sort of partly your idea.
It's a baby. It's a baby that we helped bring into the world, and now it's a teenager, and we're very excited about it. Yeah.
And so tell us all. It's a curriculum that you're doing. Okay, so tell us about what it is, and then how you developed it.
Sure. It really started about 6 or 7 years ago. We had the Emmanuel 9 happen, and then we had just a really hard time in our community of a racial reckoning that was happening long before George Floyd. So around 2015, 2016, a lot of library staff said, how are we going to respond? We're a library, so we're neutral, right? That's where we usually, that's our lane.
Books and DVDs.
And yes, and we're supposed to be a neutral space. But how can we be neutral in the face of intolerance and injustice? And when people around us are hurting and they're talking at each other and not to each other.
Right.
So how can we be a space where people can convene, right? That's what we are known for, places where people get access to information. And so we really had to ask ourselves this question, are we gonna be neutral about this? Are we gonna put our hand on this thing and really try to help our community navigate these challenges? And so we started Let's Talk Race. It was a social awareness task force at the time, where we were having these dialogue, we called them circles of dialogue, where people would sit in the table with a facilitator, a library staff person. We were
literally
trained.
in a circle, I guess.
Literally in a circle.
These were evening conversations?
Evening conversations. We broke bread together, we had food, and we really talked about the hard stuff. We talked about white privilege. We talked about white advantage. We talked about equity and inequity and how we contribute to these type of systems as a community. We also talked about what our own biases are, right? How do you check your bias? How do you make sure that you're not living in this bubble where you think you're very proximate to your neighbors, but you really aren't? And so we started there, and it just grew. We started talking about social justice was our first topic. We talked about women's rights. We talked about all kinds of things, but guess what stuck? Race.
Yeah. Sort of like a common denominator throughout all these
things.
It's
we can't fix anything else until we really address racism and race issues. And so we started Let's Talk Race probably right before the pandemic. We changed our name to Let's Talk Race, and to really get into these conversations.
Who came? How popular? Was it really
so popular?
How many people would come to these?
I think our largest group that we've done just organically, where the community showed up, not where we had it at an event or at a conference or something, was about 100 people.
Wow, 100 people. I guess mixed groups.
Yes, that's what's so beautiful. I always think, we're going to be preaching to the choir when we have these conversations, right? It's going to be all the same kinds of people, but we had people from different faiths, we had different perspectives. I did a table once, which I facilitated this conversation. I had 3 80-year-olds. One of them was a
Set
white
in their
male,
ways, presumably.
right? A white male who, up until he was about 70, was a white supremacist, and was now on this journey of learning more about races that he'd been before thought they were beneath him, and learned it at church, which was eye-opening for everybody in the circle, right? And then he's from the South. And then I had 2 feminists who were activists in New York that were 80 years old who were black. I had 2 college people that were, I believe they were Latinx that were sitting at the table. And then I had a college professor who dealt with equity at one table. And it was the most honest conversation I've ever had about race and racism in a way that really not just really addresses the problem, but really gets to the heart of how our perspectives need to shift and how we learn.
So you were detecting a need for this, a hunger for
Yes,
this. I mean, people really want to talk about this.
People love to talk, as you can see, right, in your job. You see,
just
people
give
love
them
to
a
talk.
safe space to do it, then they'll do it happily, and right?
And safe.
It's a misnomer to think that these are difficult conversations that nobody wants to deal with.
They want to have them.
Yeah.
People want to ask, can I touch a black woman's hair? People want to ask those questions.
Yeah.
What's wrong? Why can't I? They want to know they don't want to make missteps. A lot of people don't want to make missteps, and they don't have anybody they can ask in a safe space where they don't feel judged, where they can, even as a person of color, I want to say what I think white privilege is and what it means and how it's impacted me. How do I do that in a safe space where I'm not going to maybe stir up anger, defensiveness, right? So that's what our conversations have been able to do. And what we noticed, we were getting people from all over the country asking us to do these things. And we're a library in Columbia, South Carolina. We can't be everywhere.
You're kind of the library in Columbia, South Carolina, right? But
and Charleston is amazing too, in Greenville. I mean, there are lots of good libraries in South Carolina.
I don't deny it. I don't deny it at all. So,
but we are doing this
You
work.
expanded? I mean, people were inviting you to
do
bring
it
this
everywhere. I think within maybe a year and a half since George Floyd's murder, and then we had Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and all of these awful things that happened, and there was so much pain, and people wanted to talk about it. They wanted to be able to safely express these things. We got such a huge call, we decided instead of just going everywhere, because we can't be everywhere all at once, we decided to create a curriculum. And we're really excited about it. It drops in 2023. So in a matter of weeks, we're seeing the last edits now.
All right.
And we are really excited about what this is going to do.
Are you taking the initiative and distributing this to,
Yes.
Or are people signing up for it? How does that work? How do people get the curriculum?
We will have a big press conference when it comes out. So hopefully, I don't know when this will air, but hopefully people will be able to just download it. They'll be able to go to a website, put their information in, just so we'll know who's downloading it and who's using it.
Right.
And then they'll be able to have it and use it. And we have videos in it. We have tools and resources. We have interviews. And we're really at this great place where our staff and our team on the Let's Talk Race team, we're really comfortable with being uncomfortable, and we're hoping people can get there too.
Yeah, it's fun to be uncomfortable.
It's fun to be
good.
uncomfortable. It's productive.
It
It
can
moves
be
it forward.
right.
It moves the conversation forward. Yeah.
Is this curriculum geared for other libraries specifically, or any institution?
One of the great things about this curriculum is that it is twofold, right? It's really threefold. It depends on where you want to start. We have tracks because we realize that learning and talking about race, racism, equity, diversity, it is a journey. That's what we're really honest about. And you may be at one place and I may be at another place, right? And so one of the great things about the curriculum, you pick your pace.
Okay.
So if you're a small group and you want to do it with your faith group or your book club, you can have those resources. But if you're a big group and you're a big company and you want to have it with your 100 or 200 employees, you can do that too.
Wow.
Yeah. It's fun.
So it's flexible.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I can talk forever about it because it's such an important topic, people underestimate the power of talking.
So what happens to people in your experience as you observe them sitting around the table and talking about these issues and, you know, having this reckoning and maybe feeling uncomfortable, but also feeling probably a sense of relief, I would also assume. What happens? What is the transformation that happens? Do you sense that these people are then entering the world changed in some small way? Or?
Yes. I am surprised, Adam, at the things that people say. I've been in circles where people say, listen, I grew up in a household where I heard racial slurs every day. And they will say it at a table of people who are different than them. That's brave, man. That's a brave space to be in. And so I see the change because people are really honest and they're open and they're hungry to hear more and they're ready to talk to their neighbors. We had, right after the election in 2020, before the pandemic, we had a woman go through it and she said, you know, I woke up this morning really nervous about what world I lived in now after the election. And this conversation helped me feel a lot better about my neighbors and where I lived. And so we've seen it. We at the end of our discussion and in the curriculum, we give a list of things people can do to be more proximate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like, I mean, there are sort of two kinds of people. People who are open-minded enough, anyway, at least to open the door a crack and let in a little something, which then maybe will open the door more. But, you know, they're open-minded enough to engage in these sorts of conversations. And then, unfortunately, we have some segment of the population that's just so set, you know, they don't want to know. They really don't want to have to confront these issues because it's too risky. You know, they're probably afraid of what they might discover about themselves, and then they'll have to deal with it and contend with it. So, how do you get to those people, though?
I think
it's harder.
You know, we've had people, things have been brought up for them. I did a table, we had a facilitated conversation, and this woman didn't realize that everything she was saying was offending someone. She had no idea that she was triggering a lot of people. And then when she was told she was triggering people, she shut down. She didn't want to talk about it. She's like, I'm never coming back to this discussion. But I got her off to the side and I was like, let's just talk. And at the end of it, now she's like the biggest supporter of this work. She's out telling people to come to our conversations. So I think not attacking people and making people feel safe is really important, because then they'll tell other people, look, I went there and I got this conversation and now I feel better, and now you can come in and there's safety in this space. No one's going to turn on you. Yeah. That's what the facilitators are for.
Right.
We make sure that no one turns on you in this circle.
Yeah, and that's the point, I guess, to restrain from judgment and accusations and finger pointing. And
those are our guidelines.
Yeah.
We have guidelines to start every conversation.
As soon as you do that, you just shut everything down, right?
Yeah. So I'm really excited about what this is going to do. In Richland County, we're about 50-50, right? As far as racial demographics, and there's a nice diversity. There's a nice amount of diversity here, but there are areas of the country where there's very little. We've talked to libraries. I talked to a library very recently that said they had no people of color on their staff at all. And they said, how do I have this conversation about race if everyone is the same? And I think this curriculum is going to help people do that. That's when we created it for people who don't know where to start. The person that doesn't know where to start and the person who's already halfway down, you know, through the marathon, they're ready to go. So we really created it for everyone in mind, but specifically for those places that don't have access to the information that we do and resources. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I can't wait to hear more about it. You know, as the curriculum is disseminated and various institutions and groups start to adopt it. It would be interesting to see what the feedback is.
And I keep saying it's a little library in Columbia, South Carolina, and to know that we're helping spearhead this effort, not just here in South Carolina, but all over the nation, really hits me right here in my heart, because this work is so very important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's coming from South Carolina, which means something.
It means something.
It does, right?
Yeah, it does.
All right, let's talk about you, a little more about you. How did you get to this point? How did you end up in this library doing this work? What were you doing just before this?
I was here at the library. I've been here for 8 years,
Yeah.
which is really awesome. In fact, I just celebrated my 8 year in December. 8 years here.
Congratulations.
Thank
8
you,
years.
thank you. December of 2022.
Call me in 2 years when it's 10. I like even numbers.
Okay, even numbers are
We'll
good.
Bring a cake.
So I've been doing community relations. I've been doing PR for a long time. Let's Talk Race was just kind of this other duties as assigned, and it was something that resonated with me so much, and I was so passionate about it, and I just kept pushing the issue and learning more and finding out as much information as I could about it, and really moving into this EDI space. And now I feel like all of the career I've had, from journalism to PR to now doing this equity work, I feel like I was born to do this, right? I feel like really at home in this space.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you sort of did grow up in an environment where these issues were present.
Yes.
And talked about and
All the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. You grew up in Hollywood?
I grew up in Hollywood, Youngs Island. My father is a civil rights activist, has been pretty much my whole life. I don't know any other difference. My mother is also someone who cares very deeply about equity and accessibility. And so it was always in my head. And, growing up, even the thought of being on television was so strange and foreign to me, because no one at the time when I was growing up, there wasn't before Carolyn Sawyer and so many others, and Carolyn Murray.
Right.
Before all of them, there was no one really on television that looked like me. So to be told as a little kid, it's possible for you, you can do this thing, I think even started my desire to make things better for the next round.
And that happened to you, right? There was a teacher who was very inspirational to you.
Yes.
And basically did tell you
Yes,
could
she
be
did.
anything, you could do anything, which is not the typical scenario. You're lucky
No.
in that way, right?
I was very blessed to be surrounded by people who saw in me early that I could do anything. And I think one of the things that my dad does all the time, he gave me, when I was in second grade,
We should specify to viewers, by the way, I suppose, that your dad
is Nelson Rivers the third.
third,
Nelson
right.
B. Rivers the third.
Exactly.
You can't leave the
What does
B out.
B stand for?
Bernard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, he.
Now I know.
Now you know. But when I was 7, he gave me this book of 101 African American women. I think it was like Black women in history, and it was broken up into medicine, science, TV. It was broken up to all these entertainment, singing, like everybody.
Right.
And I memorized it from cover to cover at 7, so much so that my mother actually made copies of it because it was so torn.
It was starting to fall
It was
apart.
starting to fall apart. So I had like this little Bible, I guess, of achievement and belief that I could do this thing, that it wasn't, though I didn't have a roadmap, right? No one was doing it around me, or I didn't have the representation that we have today, I still believed it was possible for me.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, Hollywood, Youngs Island, for people who don't know, is very rural.
Very.
It's pretty poor.
Yeah. It felt rich to me.
Yeah, well,
It felt rich
because
to
the
me.
community is so important, right?
Yeah.
So, so coming from that place to where you are now has been a bit of a journey, I suppose, right?
It has been a really good journey. I remember I was interviewing Mark Sanford. I was on WIS at the time, and I forgot what he was doing. I don't know. But at this point, I'd been interviewing him a lot. It was in the news a lot. For some reason, it escapes me. And I remember during the interview, he said my name. He was like, well, Tamara this and Tamara that. And I got in the car after the story, and it hit me. I was like, here I am, this little girl from Youngs Island, South Carolina, and the governor knows my name.
Yeah.
My grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandfather, they never would have believed that here I am on the nightly news every night, the news that they watched, that they got their information from, and here I am interviewing the governor. And it's small, right? It's a small thing, but it's one of my epiphany moments that I bring up a lot, especially when I talk to younger people, because it was that moment that I was like, okay, I deserve to be here. I belong in this space too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about how you got to be a journalist then.
Yeah.
I guess we should start a little. So you're in Hollywood. You're growing up in Hollywood.
Yeah,
and where
moved away.
You moved away.
Yes, my mom moved us to, we went to Atlanta. She was a pastor, so we went to Atlanta while she went to school, and then we moved to a smaller town, Manning, South Carolina.
Manning, right.
And I was a radio DJ at a country music.
That's right.
country music
You love
station.
country music. It's your
I
favorite
do.
kind of music.
It's one of my favorite kinds of music. Yes, I am a closeted country music fan. I love country music. And I did that for about 2.5 years while in high school.
Oh, and it's interesting. I mean, you should. So you're this high school kid who
Yes.
hears this voice on the radio,
Yeah.
learns that the guy is leaving
Yes.
to go off to wherever.
Who was in high school with me.
Right.
He was graduating.
And you go
Yeah.
and say, "How do I get your job?"
I did. And he said, well, come to the station at like 5 o'clock on Saturday and you'll do an interview. And I did an interview. I don't even know if there were other people, because what other
Who would want
person
that?
wants to work overnight every Saturday and Sunday for the rest of their life, for 2 years. But I did, I really did. And I learned so much. Even then, having conversations about equity and diversity and race and racism, even though I didn't realize it at the time, I really was, because some people would call in with some really strong ideas about race and racism and wanted to vent those things. And here I am, 16, 17 years old, trying to navigate those conversations.
Like racist ideas.
Racist ideas,
Yeah, okay.
very racist ideas. Using racial slurs on the phone with me because they had no idea who they were talking to, right? And so, but I think even then, I've been looking back on my career as I've been doing this work, and how I really always thought of my dad as this revolutionary person, and he is. And I would kind of say, well, he's the renegade, right?
Right.
He's the
He's the
person.
one to do that.
He's the activist. I'm more reserved. I'm more PR focused. But then I've looked at my career and my life, and I realized that I am just as much, maybe not as much. Let me take that back, because he's very passionate.
It's hard to be that much.
But yeah, he's all in, and
yeah.
I'm all in too. I think our paths are different, but the work is the same.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you internalized it. I mean, it's just part of who you are.
Yeah.
So now you're on the radio. You're doing for 2 years. You have this
2
show while you're
years.
in high school, on the weekends, overnight, and everything. And in the meantime, no doubt, getting good grades and preparing for college.
Going to college, getting ready to go to college.
And where'd you go to college?
I went to USC, University of South
Right.
Carolina, for both my undergrad, my bachelor's in mass communication, journalism and mass comm, and then also for my master's in library science.
So once you got here, this was it for you? Like you realized that Columbia was
No, I moved away. I went to Hilton Head in Beaufort and did one-man band reporting for about 1.5 years during 9/11, which was really interesting. Saw some amazing things down there and enjoyed that, and then wanted to move back to Columbia, and I worked at WIS for about 5 years.
Okay.
Three or 5 years.
Right.
It's a blur.
Right. Until finally you had achieved, maxed out on the whole news thing, right?
I think it maxed out on me. I was getting an ulcer. I was really stressed. I was seeing death a lot. I was going to a lot of funerals. I couldn't do it anymore. And I think I told you the story how I was in the newsroom and I was telling a reporter how I was getting, a producer, Jimmy Henson, and I was telling her, I was like, man, I'm getting this ulcer. I'm stressed out. I'm so close to kind of achieving this dream of being the Black Connie Chung, that I always wanted to be. And I'm so close. And I said, but I am ruining myself. And she said, well, some dreams are stupid, right? And I thought, yeah. They are. Not that dreams are stupid, obviously, but if it no longer serves you well, then it no longer serves you. And I think I had to come to that road in TV. I'm much better behind the camera and doing the PR part, I think, than I was in front of the camera.
So you went back to school for library services?
I did,
You got a
library and
master's
information
degree in
science.
Library
Yes.
information science.
Mm-hmm. Way later, 12 years after I graduated with my bachelor's.
Yeah, I mean, I went back to school too, years later. I mean, people go back to school.
Yeah, they go back to
It's good.
school.
They change.
It was really important for me to marry this passion that I have for libraries with my skill on how to promote them and how to tell their stories.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and so really my first job at libraries was here. I've never worked at
Why
another
do you
library.
like libraries so much?
Where else can you get access to information? Right now, both of us, no matter the skin that we're in, our jobs, our monetary status, our familial status, race, gender, sexuality, we all have access to the same information. Yeah. Where else can you go and
a
get
lot
that?
of it.
And lots of it. Books are everywhere. Information is everywhere. There's no place else that is open 7 days a week that allows you to walk in the door and have access to this type of information where we're all on the same playing field. It's the great equalizer, and that's what libraries represent to me. They've been so instrumental in who I am as a person. To me, I tell the librarians here and our social workers here that we work magic every single day.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, and it rings so true, but it strikes me then that you conceive of the library in political terms. It's an equalizer. It is an instrument for achieving certain socioeconomic goals potentially.
We can help.
Or to assist, right?
We can help. Yeah. We can help. I recently did a panel discussion, and they said, "Can libraries save democracy?" Dun, 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 dun. And I said, "No, not by ourselves," right? But we can help. We definitely have a need. There's a need for us to do this work, and it's really important work. But it really is a community effort.
Yeah.
But this time around, I think libraries in the South specifically, if you look at our history, we have not always been on the right side of history. We were segregated. We did not allow people of color in our libraries for a long time. We had black reading rooms or reading rooms for people of color. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Hidden Figures, where she has to steal the book off the shelf because they wouldn't let her check it out. My goal, my hope is that this time around, when history is told 100 years from now, they will say that libraries were on the cutting edge and were really instrumental in supporting anti-racism work and being spaces where everyone belonged, where everyone felt welcomed, where everyone felt included. That's my goal. I wake up every morning with that big, lofty goal in mind. How can I make this library more accessible?
Well, it seems to be working. I mean,
we try.
This library, I've been here a few times
Yeah?
over the years.
Yeah.
And it seems to just be particularly dynamic and robust with lots of programming, and it's not just about coming in and borrowing and lending and accessing books and information and computers and whatever. There's a whole set of programming and educational activities and things like that for kids and adults.
We're not your father's library, right?
No, you're not. You're not.
We do more than books. That's one of our taglines, our unofficial taglines here. I think when you can see a child walk in and see a gallery space that may never go to a museum and their eyes light up, that's magic.
Yeah.
When you have a parent that's struggling on how to help their child learn how to read because they don't have maybe access to some of the books and the resources that cost a lot of money, and they can check it out and take it home, that's magic. When someone doesn't know where they're going and they're sleeping on the street and they talk to our social workers and we help them get jobs, that's magic. It really is. I mean, it seems like something that we take for granted, but our life-changing abilities that the library has here is really something, as you can tell, that I feel really, really passionate about.
So how do you see your future unfolding?
Oh gosh. There's this line in, there's a Beyonce song called I Was Here, and it's one of my favorite songs. And she's like, when I close my eyes, I want to know that I did my best, that I gave it all, like I left it all on the field. That's what the song's about. And I think no matter what I do and where I go next, I think equity and diversity and inclusion will always be at the cornerstone of what I do, just because of the skin that I live in. It's always going to be really important to me that people are treated the way they're supposed to, and fairly and equitably. But I hope whatever I do next, whether it's in libraries, it's always going to be in libraries, let me just say that.
Yeah.
But
you got that degree.
I've got the degree, I've got to use it now. Yeah. But no matter what I do, I think it's going to be really vitally important that I am always working and stretching and growing towards making the community better for my daughter, for my daughter's daughter, for those that come after me, come before me, all the things. I want to make my grandparents really proud. They could not read. They were functionally illiterate. And I remember my grandmother, when I was maybe 4, I asked her to read something for me. I read it really early. I started reading at like 4 and 5. And I said, "Oh, Grandma, now your turn." And she said, "I can't read that," right? And it broke my heart because she was the smartest person I knew. This woman knew everything in my 4-year, 5-year-old brain, and it broke my heart. And I remember her telling me, you never make fun of anybody that can't read. You had the privilege of being born when you did. I had the privilege of being born in 1928. You were born in 19... And you have this privilege. And so I think about her all the time because I want to make her proud. I want to make my granddaddy proud. I want them to say that, well done, you did good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
Tamara King. You're
Thank
doing
you.
good.
Well, thank you. That means a lot.
And it's really an honor and a pleasure to talk with you about
Ditto.
these very important issues. Amen. The library is essential to our community.
It is essential.
And thanks for all you do here.
Thank you.
It's
It
a
is
pleasure.
truly my pleasure.